This is Tom Shanahan. I'm here today with Chris B. Welcome to Meet a Member. We're really excited to have all of you here with us today to listen, to learn, and to hear all about Chris's experience, strength, and hope, and his recommendations on how you can make the most out of your recovery. If you're a member of this page and you're interested in being a guest on Meet a Member, please, you can message me here at this page, or you can message me on my own private page. I'd love to have people with 10 years, 15 years, and also day counters that are willing to come on and share their experience, strength, and hope. Chris B is someone who's posted in this group. That's how I found out about Chris. He has a State of Gratitude shirt. That's what got my attention. I know what that's about. I've gotten to know Chris a little bit, but now I want everyone else in the community to meet Chris. Chris B lives right now in Orlando, Florida. And right now, Chris, could you do me a favor, say hi to everybody, especially all those dads celebrating Father's Day out there, and maybe just share a little bit on your experience, strength, and hope, okay?
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. Hello, everybody. Happy Father's Day or Happy Daddy's Day, whichever you prefer. So a little bit about myself. My name's Chris. As we've already mentioned before, I'm 31 years old. My sobriety date is actually April 30th of this year. My experience, strength, and hope it's been a very interesting ride to get to this point where I am at today. I grew up in Orlando, Florida, a town called Celebration, which is actually a Disney designed and created town. My mom is from Colombia. My dad's American. So, we had things pretty well. I never really had too many struggles growing up. I was a good student. I played tennis in high school. I went to college in Boston. It wasn't until I went to college that I actually really started drinking heavily. I started drinking in high school and experimenting a little bit with drugs. But when I was in college is when I really kind of delved in. I didn't have that parental supervision anymore. So I had the ability to just kind of let my hair down and go loose. In college is when I really started to kind of suffer a lot with my grades. I held various internships and I lost all those opportunities with different companies just due to the fact that I was drinking way, way, way too much. And I came out when I was about a sophomore in college. So then I started experimenting a whole lot in that side of things. I was going out to the gay bars with fake IDs. I probably had about 15 fake IDs. I was so desperate to be able to go out to these bars, to be able to drink and, get off of this campus that I was going to, where I was going to school, and go and hang out with other gays such as myself and just go and I used to get pretty drunk and ended up in a lot of the situations that I probably wouldn't have if I would have just stayed on campus. But hey, it was all learning situation. It was all a learning experience for me, to say the least. Fast forward, I ended up moving to New York after I graduated from college. I lost my first job in New York when I was working at Johnson & Johnson from going out too much. I really liked to go out in New York, wherever I was. I was always a really social person, so I didn't really have a problem finding people who wanted to do things. It wasn't until, all these different experiences, I moved to a whole bunch of different cities. I lived in Boston, New York, Miami, Orlando, Chicago. And in all these different places, what I've always realized is that I was always kind of chasing something. I was always trying to find something. Anytime something would go wrong in New York or in Boston or in Miami, I'd pick a different city and I'd move to it, thinking that something was always going to be different in any one of these situations or in any one of these locations. And I would just end up finding myself in the same rut over and over and over again, losing jobs, surrounding myself with all the wrong people, getting even more and more and more caught up in different drugs and heavier drugs. Every single time I moved to a different city, I would pick up a new drug, a new habit, and go even a step further than I was before. When I got to Chicago, I hit basically my rock bottom. I was living in an apartment. I'd been there for about a month. I had this person who was living in my apartment with me. He had stolen my identity. He had taken videos and pictures of me doing very, very interesting things that I really didn't want to get out to my parents or to my employers. And he was manipulating me and threatening me with all this information, and he was going to release it out to the world if I didn't do exactly what he wanted me to do. Stole lots of money. It was a really messed up situation. But all in all, I was kind of at a point where I didn't really know what to do. My parents ended up surprising me in Chicago. They showed up one day, came knocking at my door, found me a complete disaster, and told me that I needed to go to seek help or they weren't going to support me anymore. And at that point, I went to treatment, kicking and screaming. I was not convinced at the time that I was even remotely an addict of any sort, even though I had literally done everything under the sun. I had found myself in every situation possible, you know, nights on end of going out and partying, sleeping with different people every single day for weeks, finding myself in these situations and these circumstances that normal people never found themselves in. It wasn't until I was removed from the situation, you know, and as an outsider looking in and looking back on the situation that I was in before I even went to treatment, I was like, wow, like that was really something. And what was I thinking? It was not until I pulled myself out and I looked at myself again and realized that, I was actually probably an addict, and a lot of the things that I was dealing with were actually really fucked up. I'm super grateful for being in the position that I am in now. Although I don't have months and years and years and years of sober time, I recently relapsed when I was about 6 months sober due to COVID circumstances and different things of that nature. But I mean, through all of this, having this sort of clarity now and realizing that, you know, how do I say this? Realizing that I'm able to accomplish so much more today and be present for so much more today than I ever was in the past. I mean, today's Father's Day, and this is probably the first Father's Day that I've spent with my dad in I don't even know how many years. And it's incredible that I can do this and be a part of today, you know, be a part of the grilling. I can go out and make breakfast for my dad in the morning. I'm not sure if that's a Mother's Day thing or a Father's Day thing, but I did that for him anyway. But yeah, it's kind of like where I'm at right now.
Well, you know, I can relate to almost everything you said with some differences. And I think that the reality is, and by the way, we're live. So folks, if you want to maybe ask some questions, feel free to shoot us some questions. So I got to tell you, I think that a lot of people out there can relate to a lot of what you said. And I want to get back to the issue that you came back from a relapse recently, because I think there's a lot of lessons that can be learned from that.
Yeah.
I too have relapsed in my story. But I think it's important to share it with the audience. But you have a shirt on called State of Gratitude. Before we get into, we're going to talk about relapse, about your experiences, both as a day counter and, you know, getting sober during COVID-19. Then we're going to get into like the stuff that everyone wants to know about, sex and recovery, those kinds of things. But what is State of Gratitude, and why are you wearing that shirt?
So State of Gratitude is actually an initiative that I started in COVID, kind of very shortly after my burning bush experience, as I like to call I call my relapse my burning bush experience at times. You'll find out maybe a little bit more as to why I do. But I started about 6 weeks ago, and it's basically an initiative where 25% of my net profits from this site go to grants that I created in order to assist individuals who are new to recovery to get back on their feet again. Seeing as I've gone through this process before, I kind of noticed where there were places, gaps in which, you know, there were bridges that needed to be, you know, established. So at this time, I've kind of like developed some apparel, including shirts, tank tops, hats that are all branded with State of Gratitude. I hope to be able to like bring in other recovering creative types to be able to help them to sell their goods with a common mission on the site, help other addicts in the community
Let me
who.
ask you a question, because one of the things that really caught my attention, and hi, Melvin Ingram is watching. He was my guest last week. Melvin, you are a rock star because we got the technology down this week and you were the first person to volunteer to come on the show. And I thank you so much. I'm going to have you back so we can do it without all the road bumps. But Chris, one of the things that got my attention about what you were doing with State of Gratitude is you got your stimulus check. And what did you do with the stimulus check?
Yeah, I got my first stimulus check, and I went ahead and I invested in starting this initiative, starting the site, ordering apparel to help in, like, to be able to kind of like start something in order to be able to help other people in the future. Yeah, I've got to
Do you
start.
realize how big that is? Like, do you realize? No, I'm serious. Now, if you had been in active addiction, you would have gotten it and given it all to your drug dealer, or probably gone to a bar and
Yeah,
spent it on the go-go boys. So you actually took the money and you're using it to actually help other folks. And I just think that's huge. If somebody wants to support what you're doing, how can they do that?
they can go to stateofgratitudeusa.com and they can purchase any one of the goods that we have up there on the site.
And Melvin says you're amazing, by the way. I'm reading his comments. He was on the show last week with one of your shirts on too. And so he's obviously a fan. Spread the message, everybody on this page. It's the coolest thing. So I want to get back now to the point that you got sober in October of last year.
Right.
You were sober up until April. So
Right.
you had about 6 months and then you relapsed in part, a large part because of what's happening with COVID-19. There's a lot of people out there struggling. There are people overdosing and dying every day in numbers that this country's never seen before because of the pandemic. So I'm getting emotional because I read the numbers. What was it that led you to relapse? And what was it that got you back?
See, while I think that COVID played a role in my relapse, I don't think it was the end all be all or the one key factor in what kind of like led to the overall culmination of me actually relapsing. I think that going leading up to the situation, I wasn't as frequently going to meetings anymore. I had started working a full-time job where I kind of let that take precedence, and I wasn't in touch with my sponsor as often. I also had a sponsor in a different city, which I'm not saying is a good thing or a bad thing. I just think that it also does play a role in the level of ability that I had at the time to maybe like be in touch or actually meet with him face to face. I mean, at one point we were going back and forth a lot between, San Diego, oh my God, San Antonio and Austin. And then once I started working a lot, I got busier, and, those meetings just became less and less frequent. And then coupled with me not going to meetings as much, and then I kind of put a halt on working the steps. Although I had worked the steps thoroughly once, you never really fully finish them, and you have to turn around and start working with other people or do other things in order to help keep that momentum alive. And I kind of let it die at a certain point when I started working my job. And then when COVID hit, I had no foundation on which to fall back on. So I kind of fell flat on my face.
Mm-hmm. Well, what were the precursors? And Melvin has a good question. I'm going to get to that in a minute. But what were the signals or the signs so that other people can learn from this? The precursors to your relapse, because by the time you relapse, things have happened along the way. What are the signs, and what should people look out for so they can avoid being in a similar situation?
Well, I fell out of my routine. So the first things that I kind of like took note of were the fact that I was not following through on my routine in the mornings. I wasn't doing the things that I promised myself that I said I was going to do. Once I had let up 1 or 2, 3 days on something, I kind of lost the momentum that I had already established for such a long period of time. I mean, it's so easy for myself to lose momentum if I just like don't do it for a day or 2 days or even 3 days, and just that was the first thing that I kind of took notice of, was the fact that I wasn't going to meetings as often. And rather than making it an initiative, I found myself making a lot of excuses and, thinking that I could do one thing or the other in lieu of going to meetings, and, justifying my actions just never really kind of never really, I don't know, helped me in the long run, I guess.
I think that's helpful to a lot of people because relapse is part of my story too. And many of the elements that you just mentioned were part of my story too. And so Melvin's asking to your comeback, you came back in, you had a couple of days out and you came back in. What lessons did you learn from the relapse?
Oh my God. The lessons I learned. I'm not invincible. That was probably the biggest one that I learned. I mean, I went into recovery thinking that I was going to be, I don't know, the Kobe Bryant or the LeBron James of recovery, and that I was just going to be the most amazing individual in the whole entire world. I was going to have no problems, no issues, no challenges, no struggles, that it was just going to be this clear, open highway that I could totally take advantage of. And, you know, I never took into consideration the fact that there were going to be speed bumps or, you know, traffic stops along the way. And I kind of always put myself on a pedestal. I'm not going to lie. I thought that I was a little bit better than, you know, better than the system, or not better than the program, but better than, in the sense that I didn't necessarily need to worry so much about myself because I was always going to be okay. And then when things actually did start happening to me, you know, I wasn't equipped or prepared to fully combat them the way that I wish I would have, had I just been a little bit more humble through the process and realizing that I'm just as vulnerable as everybody else. Then I probably, who knows, hindsight's 2020, but
It is, and alcohol and drugs definitely helps to inflate the ego, right? It does. It changes the way we think up in our brain, and it just really impacts a lot of things. And so you're a member of this page. You're a gay, sober, single man. What's it like to be a gay, sober, very handsome, single guy in recovery?
I mean, it's very different. It's not exactly the easiest thing in the whole entire world, though, either. I mean, being new to recovery, I think it was very important to me the first time, and even still this time, to keep sex and recovery both very, very separate. And making sure that, like, I'm kind of putting myself first and not kind of putting other people before my recovery. That's always been, yeah.
If you don't mind me asking this question, because I think there's two reasons that people relapse, which tend to be not spoken about so much at meetings, but it's the sex and the finances. Those seem to be the two big things. So when you say you're keeping sex and your recovery separate, what does that mean? Because again, what you're saying here could really help keep somebody else from coming out. So what do you mean by that?
Sex and recovery separate. I've kind of always been the person myself who my friends I've more or less have probably had some sort of sexual relationship with in some way, shape, or form. The two are very intermingled and synonymous. And so for me, keeping my recovery and my support system separate from my sex life means establishing a support system and friends that I can actually truly rely on, without the precursor or the notion that there's going to be some sort of unspoken of innuendo or this agreement, this sort of sexual agreement that comes tied with it. Like, I'm not going to be friends with you unless you have sex with me, or if we have this like ulterior motive involved. Just having my recovery separate from sex means that, like, you know, if I'm in a relationship with somebody, that's going to stay outside the rooms. And if I, you know, don't.
That's great advice. And for the first 6 months, from October until you relapsed in April, what was your dating life like? What was your sex life like? And what could others benefit from? What lessons did you learn? Because listen, I was a date counter too, and people used to tell me, you shouldn't date in the first year. I was very confrontational. I'd be like, where is that written in the big book? Show me. And it's not. So people would be like, so I was like a total bitch. But let me say, that was a big part. Okay, so we have a lot in common. But that's what led me to relapse, and learning to, like, take it down a notch, and listen. It's a huge thing. So in those 6 months, how did you handle the, because these are tough issues. How did you handle them? And what advice do you have for other day counters that are out there in the first 6 months or maybe year of their recovery?
One of my biggest issues has always had this feeling of always having this thought in the back of my mind, or always wondering if I'm ever enough, and if I'm ever going to be enough to somebody else, or are they always going to be wanting something else from somebody else? Am I going to be somebody who can wholeheartedly give myself in a relationship and expect the same in return? When I got sober, that was like one of the first questions I asked my sponsor, because I thought that, how could I function as a human being if I'm not able to have sex, for a substantial period of time? And he literally just told me, he was like, once you make it through the steps the first time, he's like, then I think that you're okay to date. I mean, you're not trying to go out and run out and get married the moment that, you step out as a sober man. But at the same time, it's like just being sensitive or careful, or not so hard on yourself, or not so hard on myself. I mean, me personally, I removed all the apps from my phone. So I don't have Grindr, Scruff, Adam for Adam, Craigslist, Hoop and Bingle, or whatever. I don't know, whatever else there is out there that I haven't heard of yet. For me, it's all about meeting people organically and kind of like going back to basics and rewiring the way that my brain thinks and operates. I don't like the way that a lot of those apps kind of focus on instant gratification, and the idea of culminating a relationship with someone before actually engaging in sex with them. It's kind of like,
I tell you, I did the same thing. I mean, actually for years, I got rid of the apps and everything off my phone. And it's excellent because I read a lot of Buddhist books. I'm not Buddhist, but I follow a lot of their teachings. And what I didn't realize was every time I went on those apps, I wasn't being present in my life where I really should be caring for me. I was distracted going off to be with someone else and do a fantasy world that really didn't exist and never got me anything positive anyway. Quite frankly, some people, they have a different result, but for me, it was that way. So I think taking those apps off of your phone is huge. Let me ask you a question. How is your relationship with your sponsor now different than your relationship with your sponsor pre-relapse? You have different sponsor, different sponsor?
I have the same sponsor.
Okay, and how is it a different relationship?
I think our relationship is better. It's changed. Let's say that. I don't think it's necessarily better or worse. I think that recovery in and of itself it's an evolving road, and we're constantly learning new things about ourselves every single day that we're on, this path. And my relationship with him now is different, but he understands me more, and he can call me out a little bit more on my bullshit than he could before. Which I appreciate and I like. And so our relationship is more dynamic, and there's other things that are kind of like at play. He's more of a sponsor to me today than he may have been able to be in the past, but he's also more of a friend. He's more of an individual that I can look to or rely on for advice and different things.
Let me ask you another question, because today's Father's Day, and you were at a barbecue with your dad earlier today, and I think you said this was maybe the first time in years that you were actually home with your family. I get that, and it's like I remember being in active addiction, having like this total secret life, come home and be like, so what's new at school or whatever. It's like, oh, nothing, whatever. Like really, my family had very little knowledge about, they might have thought it, but okay, so you get that. So, you're home now, you're with your folks, and you're with your family and support system. What is it, how has that been? I mean, this is the first time probably in years you've had that kind of an open, they know what your issues are, they know what your problems are, and they're part of your life again, and they love you, right? So what's that like? And for others out there who maybe they're nervous to talk to their family, but they want help. They desperately want help, but they're nervous about communicating with their family. What do you suggest?
I mean, today has probably been one of the least stressful family holidays that I've experienced in years. I mean, family holidays to me used to be the most stressful things on the face of the earth, partly because of this reason that I was leading this double life. I mean, you have to keep like a notebook with all the lies that you've told over the years. And then if they
Are
ask you,
we related? Are we related? We didn't.
yeah, right? They
You and I are like,
they're like, wait a minute, hold on. What did I say to that question? You said April 15th? Hold on a minute. That's where I said, yeah, the dentist. That's where I said I was. No, I mean, like, today is just like a completely different experience because there's this like ease of mind that like there's nothing really that I have to lie about. There's no lies that I'm like, standing in front of hoping that they're not gonna fall out of this like big giant like hole that I have behind me and be like, no, don't look back there. I mean, there's just this fluidity of conversation that just goes on between all of us that is just, it's, I don't know, it's like a huge weight has been lifted off of my shoulders.
and like for someone out there who's afraid to be honest with their family. And by the way, Johnny Milan, thank you. He says what we're doing is a great thing. And so shout out to you, Johnny. But for those people who are desperate need of help and maybe afraid to ask for it from their family, what advice do you have?
I mean, just do it, to be perfectly honest. I know it may seem like the hardest thing in the entire world to do, uh, but the moment that you reach out and you ask for help, there's really nowhere you can go but up at that point. I mean, for me, I can't speak for everybody, but my experience coming out and, you know, while I didn't ask for help, my parents kind of like dragged me to help. It has been one of the most rewarding experiences of my life, and I'm forever eternally grateful to my parents for this rebirth, I guess, of this new being that I am. And I wouldn't want to live with the weight on that shoulders, wondering what life could be or what could happen. And for me, I feel like as if you'll never really fully know unless you take that jump, or that faith has to start somewhere.
You're right. And yeah, Johnny says, we think that we're not hurting others, our family, because we're not in their lives, but we do. And
Yeah.
I think he's right about that. Chris, how old are you?
31.
Okay, so you're for people out there, especially the younger folks in recovery, and that can mean 40. It just depends on the person, I guess. But one of the big points that I hear when I hear people talk about relapsing, especially when they're young, when they're in their 20s and stuff, their life is over. They're never going to have fun again. And like, they just can't imagine like going a day without the liquor or the drugs. What do you say to those people out there that are struggling?
I was always that person too. I mean, I thought that I was never going to be able to go a day without a drink or a drug. It was my life. It was everything that I did. I was a bartender, for countless years. I think almost about 10 years working in hospitality. And, I didn't imagine my life without liquor at some point. So I was like, well, what am I going to do? But at the end of the day, it's like, I have these skills and these resources and this support that is going to help me and enable me to do so many other things. So while my sight can only go so far, and I need to kind of like just be open to the fact that there's other opportunities and there's other things that I can do with my life.
One last question for you. So from your relapse, which was at the end of April, till today, you have on a shirt that says "State of Gratitude." What
Mm-hmm.
are the top three things that you did between April 30th, which is your sobriety date, and today that led to you being in this state of gratitude?
Mm. Top three things that I've done today.
Between that period, between April 30th and today, to get to a point where you're actually wearing a shirt that
Yeah.
says "From relapse to state of gratitude in 60 days." If somebody out there wants that, they want it. They want what you have, right? What do they do top 3 things.
I write a gratitude list every morning. I remind myself every day through reflection, through meditation, through yoga, of what I'm really, really grateful for. I take a moment to just like pause by myself and just reflect. I mean, so much, so much of life gets lived so quickly, so fast, and without kind of pausing and just being present in the moment, we're never going to experience everything that we're meant to experience. And so for me, the top 3 things that I've done are I've slowed down. I started I've started practicing yoga and meditation, and I've started actually caring about my body, myself, and what I actually put into it. Um, and maybe even a 4th is just appreciating who I am and all my imperfections.
I think that that's some great wisdom from someone who's actually lived it and lived to tell and can share that. Okay, so I just want to wrap it up, but again, what's the shirt about? If someone's interested in supporting what you're doing with State of Gratitude, how do they go about that? And if somebody watches this video, because it's going to be posted on the page, and they want to reach out to you, how do they go about doing that?
Well, I have a Facebook page for State of Gratitude. My website is stateofgratitudeusa.com. We donate 25, or we set aside 25% of our net profits to grants which help individuals who are new to recovery to get back on their feet again. You can read more about that under our philanthropic vision on our website. You can read a longer version of my story on the website as well under my story. If you want to support the cause, you can go on and you can buy a shirt, a tank top, a hat. And if you want to reach out to me, you can do so via my Facebook at Chris BIlyk, or on the site Chris at stateofgratitudeusa.com.
So I just want to say that, he took his stimulus check, he used it to create this website and to get these shirts put together because he wants to help other people. So everybody on this page, you can afford this shirt. Do it, do it, do it. Let's show Chris that, we respect what he did. And it's exactly what recovery is all about, right? You're helping other people as opposed to this focus that's solely on me, 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 right? So congratulations. I think it's going to help keep you sober and hopefully a lot of other people sober. If there's anyone on this page who has, I want to have a guest on maybe in a week or so with 10 years or more of sobriety who wants to share their experience, strength, and hope and maybe help somebody out there, please let me know. You can reach me on this page, or you can reach me at Thomas Shanahan on my Facebook page. Chris, thank you so much for taking time out of your day today, and continued success with your recovery and also with State of Gratitude.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
No, we thank you. We thank you so much.